Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever, stared at a Kubernetes YAML file and just felt completely lost, like you're trying to find that one tiny detail in a sea of config lines, well, you're definitely not alone. That whole struggle, managing application deployments, the configs, especially when you need different settings for dev, staging, prod, it's this huge pile of text files that just seem to multiply. So today, we're diving deep into two really popular tools built to tackle exactly that complexity: Helm and Kustomize. Our mission here is simple. We want to unpack these tools, figure out why they exist, what problems they actually solve, how they work, and the big question, help you decide when to use which one for your own projects. Just at a high level, you can think of Helm as kind of a package manager for Kubernetes, almost like an app store, right? With these pre-built templates called charts. Kustomize, though, it's different, more like a configuration customizer. It tweaks your existing YAML files, but crucially, without using templates. So yeah, both are aiming to make Kubernetes easier, but they come at it from really distinct angles. Before tools like Helm and Kustomize showed up, just managing Kubernetes apps, man, it felt like pushing a boulder uphill sometimes. I definitely remember the pain, just manually writing, maintaining dozens, maybe hundreds of YAML files for every little piece, pods, services, deployments. It was so repetitive, super easy to make type, but just exhausting, really. And then trying to tweak those files for different environments, dev, staging, production, that usually meant hunting down lines, making manual edits, which, just inevitably led to inconsistencies, lots of headaches.
Oh, absolutely. It's true. And it wasn't just the file management hassle, right? There were bigger architectural headaches too. Think about dependencies. Your web app needs a database, maybe a cache.
Right.
Those often needed totally separate configs, separate deployment steps. It just added layers and layers of complexity. Plus, just keeping track of application versions, rolling out updates reliably, or, heaven forbid, trying to roll back quickly if something broke. It was almost impossible without some kind of structured system. And that whole mess, that perfect storm of complexity, is exactly why Helm and Kustomize came about, each one tackling those headaches, but with a very different philosophy.
Okay, so let's dig into Helm first. It steps in to fix this.
Yeah.
How does it actually work? What's the core idea behind simplifying deployment with Helm?
Right. Helm's real power comes from its concept of charts. Think of them as these pre-packaged templated bundles for an entire application. And it's not just about stuffing YAMLs in a folder. It's about providing a standard reusable blueprint. So a chart is like a complete recipe. It bundles all the Kubernetes resources your app needs, default configurations, metadata, everything. Inside these charts, you find templates. These are basically YAML files, but with Go templating syntax mixed in. Think of it like a programmatic way to generate your final YAML based on inputs. Much more powerful than just find and replace. And then there's the values.yaml file. That's key. It holds all the default settings that you can easily override and customize. And you interact with it using the Helm command line, the CLI. So running something like Helm install my app bit into my WordPress, that tells Helm. Take the WordPress chart, fill in the blanks in the templates using maybe some values I provide, generate the real Kubernetes YAMLs, and then apply them to my cluster. That built-in templating makes handling different environments, different configs, way more manageable.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned dependencies earlier, that web app needing a database nightmare. Does Helm help smooth that out?
Absolutely. That's one of Helm's biggest advantages. It's built-in dependency management. It's pretty robust. So if your WordPress chart says, hey, I need MySQL to run, Helm can handle deploying both parts together automatically. Make sure they're provisioned in the right order, configured to talk to each other, all that stuff. And Helm doesn't just like fire and forget, it actively manages these deployments as things called releases. This means it keeps track of the history of your installs. It makes upgrades using Helm Upgrade really straightforward. And critically, it gives you the power to roll back Helm rollback to a previous working version if an upgrade goes sideways. That whole lifecycle management piece, it gives teams a huge amount of confidence.
Yeah, that robust lifecycle stuff, the dependency handling, that sounds amazing, especially for really complex apps. It's almost like a proper application installer, but for Kubernetes. But I have heard some folks say that the Go templating in Helm charts, it can get pretty complex itself, right? Almost like learning another little programming language. Is that a real hurdle?
That's a fair criticism, yeah. The Go template does have a learning curve, no doubt about it. It can get intricate. But often the value you get from the ecosystem kind of outweighs that initial hurdle for many teams. Helm has this massive public repository, Artifact Hub, just packed with pre-built charts for all sorts of common software. And this ecosystem, it's not just convenient, it really democratizes deploying complex stuff. Imagine you're a small team. You can grab a battle-tested chart for Prometheus or Grafana or whatever, and deploy it reliably without spending weeks writing and debugging your own YAMLs from scratch. That's a huge productivity booster. So going back to that WordPress example with its database, a Helm chart makes that deployment almost trivial. It handles both pieces, lets you easily tweak things like the admin password or database settings just by changing values in that values.yaml file. No digging through raw YAML needed.
Okay, so Helm really nails that standardized, reusable package idea. Great for complex apps, great for leveraging community work. But what if your main goal isn't deploying these big pre-packaged things? What if you've already got your YAMLs and you just need to tweak them for different environments? That sounds like where Kustomize comes in with its different philosophy, right?
Exactly. Kustomize takes a fundamentally different path. And what's really neat is that it's actually built into Kubectl now, since Kubernetes 1.12.
Oh, interesting. So no extra tools to install.
Right. That's a big plus for many. It's a declarative tool, and its whole job is customizing existing YAML files. It uses this idea called overlays. And the key difference from Helm, absolutely no templating involved.
No templating at all. How does that work then?
So with Kustomize, you start with what's called a base. This is just your core set of standard Kubernetes YAML files, your employment, your service, etc. Plain YAML. Then, for specific environments, like staging or production, you create overlays. An overlay is basically just another directory. Inside, you put files that define changes or patches to the base. So maybe you want to change the number of replicas for production. You put that change in the production overlay. Update an image tag for a test environment. Put that in the test overlay. The magic happens in a special file called customization.yaml. This file lives in your base and in each overlay. It tells Kustomize, here are the base resources and here are the patches or other modifications to apply. So when you run, say, kubectl apply banavk and point it at an overlay directory, Kustomize first figures out the base, then applies all the specified patches from the overlay, generating the final customized YAML in memory, and then it applies that resulting manifest to your cluster.
Huh. That sounds elegant, actually. Start with a base. Layer on specific changes for each environment. It almost feels like using Git branches for your configuration, doesn't it? You have your main branch, the base, and then feature branches, overlays, with just the diffs.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, it's very much like that. You define the core stuff once in the base, and then overlays just specify the differences.
Does that make it particularly good for things like GitOps workflows, where everything is driven from your Git repository?
It's an excellent fit for GitOps, yes, because it's declarative, and it works directly with raw YAML files. You just commit your base and your overlay files to Git. Your GitOps controller, like Argo CD or Flux, can then pull those files, run Kustomize to render the final manifests, and apply them. It's very clean. The trade-off, though, compared to Helm, is that Kustomize itself doesn't track releases or manage lifecycle within the cluster. Versioning becomes purely about the versions of your YAML files in Git, which some teams prefer for its simplicity, actually. A really clear use case. Imagine you have a simple web app deployment defined in your base YAMLs. You can then create a development overlay that patches the deployment to use, say, very low resource limits, and a production overlay that patches the same deployment to use much higher resource limits and maybe more replicas. You achieve this without duplicating that whole base deployment YAML file multiple times. You just specify the changes.
Okay, this is great. We've seen Helm's packaging and templating approach and Kustomize's overlay and patching approach. Now let's put them side by side. Where do they really differ? What are those key things that should guide someone's choice?
Yeah, let's break down the core differences. It really clarifies where each one fits best. First, the fundamental approach. Helm is all about templating and creating these reusable packages, these charts. Kustomize is about overlays and patching existing plain YAML files. No templates. This directly impacts complexity. Helm is powerful, feature-rich, handles dependencies, tracks releases. But that Go templating can be a steep learning curve for some. Kustomize is generally seen as simpler, more lightweight. It focuses just on customization. There's no templating language to learn, and it's built into Kubectl.
Right, the native integration is a big point for Kustomize.
Definitely. Then there's dependency management. Helm has it built in, which is huge for complex apps. Kustomize doesn't handle dependencies itself. You'd manage that separately, maybe with multiple customized configurations or another tool. Versioning and lifecycle is another big one. Helm explicitly tracks releases in the cluster, supports easy updates, rollbacks. Kustomize relies entirely on your external version control, like Git, for managing changes to the source YAMLs.
And the ecosystem difference seems pretty stark, too.
Huge difference. Helm has the massive Artifact Hub ecosystem of pre-built charts. If you want to deploy standard software quickly, Helm's ecosystem is a massive advantage. Kustomize has no equivalent package ecosystem. Its strength lies in customizing your specific application YAMLs. And finally, integration. Helm needs its own CLI installed. Kustomize is part of Kubectl, so if you have Kubectl, you essentially have Kustomize.
That's a really clear breakdown. So, all right, let's bring it home for the listener. They're facing a choice. What are the green lights, the big signals that say go with Helm or go with Kustomize?
Okay, clear scenarios for Helm. Choose Helm if you're deploying complex applications that have multiple parts or dependencies like that WordPress and MySQL example. It handles linking them together. Go with Helm if you need reusable packages that you can share across teams or projects easily, promoting consistency. If built-in version tracking, easy upgrades, and especially reliable rollbacks are important safety nets for you, Helm's release management is key. And obviously, if you want to leverage those pre-built charts from Artifact Hub for common tools like Jinx, Prometheus, Grafana, etc., Helm is the natural choice. Also, if you need really dynamic configurations across environments that benefit from powerful templating logic, Helm provides that.
Okay, makes sense. And the signals for choosing Kustomize.
Right? Choose Kustomize when your primary task is taking existing YAML files, maybe ones you've already written or generated, and customizing them for different environments, like dev versus prod. Go with Kustomize if you prefer a lighter weight, declarative approach and want to avoid learning a templating language. It's often a great fit for managing simpler applications that don't have complicated dependencies between components. If you want that native Kubernetes integration using just kubectl without installing extra tools, Kustomize is your friend. As we mentioned, if you're leaning into GitOps workflows, Kustomize's declarative patching model integrates beautifully. That example of just tweaking resource limits between dev and prod using overlays. Classic Kustomize sweet spot.
That really clarifies things. But it makes me wonder, given they have such different strengths, is it strictly in either situation? Could you? Could you ever use them together?
That's a great question. And yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
It's actually a pretty powerful, though more advanced, strategy that quite a few teams use. You can combine their strengths. You might use Helm first to deploy a chart and essentially generate the baseline set of Kubernetes manifests for your application.
Yeah.
And then you use Kustomize on top of those Helm-generated manifests to apply your specific environment-related customizations or tweaks. So, for example, deploy a standard web app using a Helm chart to get all the basic pieces set up. Then use Kustomize with an overlay just for your production environment to maybe increase replicas, adjust resource limits significantly, or add specific production-only labels or annotations.
Wow. Okay. So you get the packaging and dependency benefits from Helm
That's
initially.
just heck.
And then the fine-grained, template-free customization from Kustomize for the environment specifics. That sounds
No,
super flexible.
it is. It offers a lot of power.
I can see how that would work. Though I guess for someone just starting out, adding that extra step, that combination, could introduce its own layer of complexity to manage in the workflow, something to keep in mind.
Definitely a fair point. It's powerful, but adds a moving part.
All right, so let's quickly recap our deep dive today then. Helm and Kustomize both are fantastic tools, really designed to make managing Kubernetes applications less painful. But they definitely serve different, though sometimes complementary, roles.
That's the key takeaway. Helm really shines with packaging complex apps, handling dependencies, and giving you that robust release lifecycle management. It's great for standardization and leveraging existing solutions. Kustomize, on the other hand, excels at that declarative, template-free customization of existing YAMLs. Perfect for environment-specific tweaks, simpler apps, or when you want that native kubectl integration and GitOps friendliness.
And knowing those core differences, understanding their philosophies, really empowers you, the listener, to pick the tool that best fits your specific project needs and your team's preferences. Maybe you start with Helm for a complex off-the-shelf app, or maybe you start with Kustomize for your custom microservice where you just need simple environment variations, or maybe, eventually, you combine them.
Exactly. And perhaps a final thought to leave you with. As your experience with Kubernetes grows, think about this interplay. How does the need for standardized, reusable packages balance against the need for very specific, granular, declarative control over your configurations? How you navigate that balance between Helm's world and Kustomize's world, or how you might even blend them, will likely continue to shape how you define, deploy, and manage your applications on Kubernetes going forward.